welcome back to our next episode, Trauma-Informed MTSS Behavior Supports. It's a really easy episode title to say.
Yes.
And when you share it with all your friends and leave us a review, you'll be like, you know what I really liked was the Trauma-Informed MTSS Behavior and Supports episode.
Yes.
That we did.
It's a good one.
Back. Yeah. As you are mulling that over in your head, you should also leave us a review if you haven't. Rate us, give us 5 stars. Give us 4 stars. 3 stars, I'll accept. 2?
I mean, at least they rated us.
Okay, at least you rated us 1 star.
That's why bother? Why
so,
bother?
I don't know if you're giving us 1 star and you're this deep into it. I'm not really sure why you're still listening, but I appreciate it, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe you just are like, I just can't stand these people. Anyway, give us the review. We would love that. It helps other people find this content and helps keep the conversation going, as we all know. All right, Trauma-Informed MTSS Behavior Supports. Here we go. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. So one of the things that we have is, and that we've worked on over the last handful of years, is an MTSS, Aligned Mental Health and Behavior Guidance Document.
Yeah, and I feel
which
like...
again sounds intense.
Yes.
I don't know that it's as intense as it sounds.
Nope.
But I think that it's one of the things that really has helped guide our school in behavior, especially through the MTSS process over the last handful of years. And we're going to talk through that document. Certainly a document that maybe you guys would make out there for your school may look different, right? It may look a little bit different based off of who and where you're at and things like that. But let's kind of dive into what we're going to do through this episode as far as how we're going to walk them through it.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just start sharing with Tier 1 levels of supports. I should say this document was developed by a team.
Yeah.
And it goes through ongoing revisions pretty much bi-yearly at this point, and we keep on adding it. We do have it available on our training site if this is something you're interested in. This is a lot of the work we do around professional development. So this is something that we can come out and talk to your school district about if you're interested in shifting. When we shift over to trauma-informed work and behavior, it's a very gray topic. The zero tolerance, black and white's out.
Yeah.
So we developed this because we have found people need guidance. And what does that look like? And it has to align with MTSS. That's just how the law works now. Makes sense. It's data driven. Yeah. So I'm going to share what we're expecting at a Tier 1 level for our building.
And so not only before you start, like not only do people need guidance, but I think like everybody needs we all need guidance, right? We all need something that we can go back to be like, wait a second though, maybe we're not doing what we said we were going to do in this document that we came up with and kind of approved as a group and then as a whole staff. We're not sticking to what this says. Maybe we're not doing the things we said we were going to do. Maybe we're doing a bunch of stuff that we said we weren't going to do anymore. Like maybe that's happening. But if you don't have something to anchor back to, then you're just kind of winging it a lot. And there is a lot of gray area. And so that's why it's really important to sit down and figure out what is important in how all this works. So take it away, Katie.
Okay, so obviously Tier 1's the strongest base. 80% of our kids fall in this area. And so this is Tier 1. It goes the general education teacher. Intervention specialist certainly will support that. But the first thing we look at is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, are the kids' basic needs being met? We offer a free breakfast. We offer a breakfast program, which we didn't have at our school before. So we introduced that. We allow kids to sleep and rest when it's necessary to make sure that basic needs being met. We make sure their indirect services in terms of, clothing and those kind of things are taken care of. We have a care closet for, hygiene needs and those kind of things. So we're taking care of their universal of their basic needs. They have to be met for them to even be ready to learn coming into school. Yeah. So we look at that. And then from a Tier 1 level, we're looking at, we use the Character Strong practices to promote behavioral success at a Tier 1 level. And so that's that's a free resource you can get on their website. So use that as a staff training tool. Our staff has gone through a 3-part series on that. It's a great book. They also have the EMR, establish, maintain, and restore relationship practices. We also put that in a 3-part series on training. So these things do require training. Our first year on, we spent a lot of time on PBIS and things that we liked about it and things that I dislike about PBIS because it's not really a trauma-informed practice. So what is PBIS?
Have a whole episode about that somewhere.
Yes, if you want to listen to about PBIS, we do have an episode. So think about what does that look like, the common expectations and how we all have ownership. This is the part that got kind of gray, is that kids walking down the hallway, they're not walking appropriately. You as the adult that works in the building, I don't care what your job is to stop the child and say, I'm sorry, we don't run here. Will you please turn around and start walking back? I'd love to watch you do that. Like, everybody has responsibility for all the kids. It's not your kids and my kids and I can't talk. Everybody's in charge of all the kids. So that's really important when we talk about PBIS. In the same return, we can reward, incentivize, praise, build relationships with all the kids in the building as well. We really stopped using the trinket system. So a lot of schools get crazy with like the prize box. We're going to announce your name. We're going to pull these tickets. It kind of goes back if you read Alfie Kohnen's book about Punished by Rewards. Those things really don't really have a huge impact at school. So we talk about relational currency. We talk about regulation. We do have like a swag tag kind of things that kids have the options for, but I don't think that's our biggest behavioral pool in the school.
Yeah, and it's kind of had to be phased out, right? Over time. It just didn't. Again, you're ultimately just paying a bunch of money for things that don't really matter.
Those are extrinsic motivations, not intrinsic motivation.
It robs you of the chance of, because then people don't focus in on like the intrinsic side of things, which is
teaching
really
them the skills.
Yeah, really the most important of the
instead
two.
Of bribing them along. So there's a real philosophical conversation to have with your staff about that. Not why I'm here to talk today, so I'm gonna keep on moving.
Sure, keep going.
The classroom community restorative practices. So there's a free pamphlet on the IRP website that you can download that we've used a lot for professional development in our building. I'm also happy to share that. But having all of your staff understand what Tier 1 restorative practices look like. These are community circles for fun, engaging activities. This is for repair. This is for connection and activity. The
academics. I mean, like you can use really for kind of across the board.
Tier 1 restorative practices. And then also with both of those things goes into creating community expectations together, having the kids do it with you. It's what we're doing with kids, reviewing those expectations really before you do anything. Today we're going to do this. This is what I'm looking for. This is the expectations that I have when we do this. You should be doing that as embedded as your teaching practices every single day. When you notice routines are falling apart, circle back up, talk about the routines, talk to the kids. Why are these falling apart? How do we improve these practices? So those are, the first 2 years, those were constant conversations we were having. It's a great time to remind about expectations up here. Good time to talk to your students about routines. And it's just so natural now that, but it all goes back to the PBIS classroom expectations and the restorative practice thing kind of going hand in hand about constantly not nagging at kids, but talking with them. What did you guys notice today when we cleaned up?
Yeah.
How do you feel like that went? And you do it for good purposes and coaching and mentoring purposes. So that has to go on both ends. I thought it went really well today. Classroom regulation strategies. We use the focus attention practices by Dr. Lori on her Revelations in Education site. So we've spent PD time about switching from no more big class regulation breaks anymore. We're teaching kids how to regulate themselves and different tools and strategies. Our school counselor actually goes in and does Tier 1 lessons in the classrooms and really focuses on all the things I talked about above, especially teaching the kids self-regulation and management skills. We do have a building level Hope Squad, Hope Squad Junior at our level. And we spent extensive amount of time talking about universal design for learning to make sure every kid has educational access. And that is more than I'm going to get into today, but that's another thing that's all expected at the Tier 1 level.
So I think what a lot of places are good at is some of the things you just mentioned, doing those at a Tier 1 level. And kind of doing like the, building a community in that way. I think those are things that we typically are have been preached for a long time in a lot of places, right? Like your classroom is your community. You have to have everybody be bought in. Maybe not all the specific tools that we're talking about are overly common, but that idea is pretty common. I think then what shifts is what happens and what you're getting ready to talk about next, right? What shifts then is then maybe an unexpected behavior occurs. Typically speaking, then all of a sudden, instead of it being like our classroom is a community and we're all in this together, then all of a sudden at the tier 1 level, it can become common for it to be like, we're all in this together. We did all these common things together. We came up with the community beliefs and everything together.
The first 2 weeks of school.
But now, unexpected behavior occurs. You need to get out. That's what can happen, I think, a lot of places. And instead, what we're saying at this tier 1 level is it needs to look a little bit different when an unexpected behavior occurs.
Yes. And I would say another environmental thing that is overlooked often, there shouldn't be tables out in the hallway. You know what tables out in the hallways are used for? Kids that get kicked out. So if you want to make kids to feel like they belong and have a sense of safety, there is no reason for a table to be out in the hallway. Your specialist could have their own rooms and spaces for that to happen if they need to pull kids. Parent volunteers, we use 2 kitchen tables at different locations that are like more community hub areas. There's really no reason for a desk or a table to be outside of any classroom. It's just for the kids that don't belong there. They get booted out there. So, we use universal screeners, right? Kids self-assess, teachers assess kids. We use data to inform our next steps for those things. But okay, unexpected behavior occurs, right?
Yeah.
The first thing we ask people to do is classroom PBS reminder by private conference with the student. This isn't like, Justin, what are you doing over here? We said we weren't going to do that, right? This is, I'm kneeling down, looking Justin in the eye, say, hey, I know you're having a really hard time right now. Remember when we talked about this is what we were supposed to be doing in our classroom, and you're having a hard time with that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? How can I help and support you right now? That's the private conversation that we're reminding kids in the classroom. And then we're also giving them opportunity for pre-correction, like noticing kids that are, Justin every day has a hard time. We come to sit down on the carpet, or in the upper grade, right? He's never ready and prepared for class. He's got all his stuff out, So before he comes in the door, I'm gonna say, Justin, we're getting ready to come for class. I've noticed you're having a hard time with these things. When you come down, I want you to think about these things as you go sit down, and this is the expectation. Make sure you're ready for class. If I can help you, let me know, right? Yeah. Or pre-correcting before the kids get in the door instead of just letting them fail automatically. So those things have happened, and now if needed, Justin doesn't listen to me, and things have gone all right. Okay, so then we talk a lot about natural consequences, a ton, which is probably another episode that we should be getting into doing. Write that down, somebody. Natural consequences. So, are implemented, and so we spent a lot of time talking about what natural consequences are. Sitting outside the principal's office or facing the wall at recess is not a natural consequence for any offense, for the most part. So, those things have to go taken away. We're not walking laps at recess is not a natural consequence for something. Standing at the wall at recess is not a natural consequence. So, those are public shaming tools. So we talk about natural consequences, and then we work through also the restorative practice questions. Again, the IRP will have those questions available for you. Teachers have those available for them in many formats that they've used as a structure, and now they naturally just do it. But there's restorative practice questions. Parents should be contacted by the teacher, a classroom teacher. I, as the building principal, should never be the first phone call home to a parent about an issue that's going on in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That is a huge one. I 100% will take back it to the teacher every time and say, have you contacted home? Okay, let's start there. You reach out to the parents, let them know what's going on in the classroom. For me to get involved, it is such an intensive level of supports that we have to kind of work our way up to the system for that to happen. And then we document. We've talked through my major and minor discipline reporting. What is a major offense? What's a minor offense? What needs to be documented where, and how does that happen? So I would encourage you to set that kind of up with your building. We do that through a behavior team we pulled together. Yeah,
and similar to this document, right, that we're going through, like that was one that was created with a team involved, and I think that's one that we also take a look at, every so often to make sure that there's nothing that needs to be shifted or changed there. But I think like having the staff ownership of that, and we kind of pulled in people from a bunch of different areas to look at that when we created that. But that's one that I know in this document, again, we have a sample of that, but really something that probably your own school needs to go through and figure out what those major versus minor incidents look like for you as a school or as a building, maybe as a district.
Yeah, and maybe some things that you just don't even care about, like gum chewing and dress code are on our we don't care list.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
And some places are real intense about those, maybe for a good reason that we just have never had to come across. But, I think that those are things that I think are important to figure out as a school, because if you don't figure them out, then everybody's kind of doing their own thing for what's the most important to them. And that's actually not a great place to be, because you have nothing, again, that you're anchoring back to as a building.
Yeah. Yep. So those are some things we're running through at the tier 1 option. But then, as we know, tier 1, the behavior continues.
Yeah.
And people,
maybe doesn't stop.
And people want a number usually of like how many times does this need to continue before we go into tier 2. And this is going to be an unpopular answer, but it just really depends on the kid and the actual offense of like what's going on. Remember, we have young brains that are learning. Fully developed brains don't happen until you're 26. For the average neurotypical person, these are little brains that are not even yet developed that we are teaching and coaching. And that's the mind shift that needs to happen at the tier 1 level. By no means are we saying chaos should be erupting. The building should feel unsafe. Kids should be suffering their education because we're tolerating so much behavior at tier 1. That is not what we're saying too. I want that to be loud and clear.
Yeah, it's just, mostly I think what you're saying, it's just really hard to quantify, like, because it doesn't take long before you become pretty much a flow chart, a kind of zero tolerance thing. Well, somebody said like if there are 3 times that this happens, then all of a sudden they're into this next tiered tier 2, kind of system, and what we're going to go about next. I just think you have to really, part of that empathetic approach is really taking it case by case. It does take more time. I understand that, but you actually get at the heart of what you're wanting to correct and why something is maybe happening if you take something on a case-by-case basis with behavior. Yeah. If you don't, then it's really, really easy to just not actually try to get at the answer at all. It's really easy just to be counting how many times something happens until eventually you can get the kid out of your room, right? That's what it's basically comes down to. And you don't want to be like that, but it's easy to fall into that trap if you're not taking a really empathetic approach and trying to figure out the why behind all this. Again, so much of this Ross Green's work, right? You can go back and listen to him on our podcast when he was on, along with all the times that we've talked about some of his work. But that's why having like a flow chart or a set number to it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I would say the part that 2 things needed to happen. One, I had to give teachers time for them to have time to take care of conferencing, talking with kids. So I took all of my classroom teachers off duty, and so that they had time to document things, to call parents. So they had an extra half hour built into their day where they had time essentially to do this work. Yeah. And so that was important. So if I wanted to give time back to myself where I wasn't managing the whole entire school's behavior, I had to make time for teachers. And so I did that. I put myself on duty in replacement of. Yeah. The other thing that happens when I take behavior as a school principal or the school counselor, we give the power away from the classroom teacher. They have lost their authority or any sense of respect or control. The kids will never listen to the teacher now because they have not written out the hard part of the relationship piece. You've spent a lot of time talking about that on other episodes as well. Yeah. But that's critically important that the classroom teacher is the one that has the resilience and rides it out with the kid. Yeah. Okay, so all those things happen. Behavior goes awry. Do you want me to start talking through this, or do you want to do it?
Yeah, I think you're killing it. So
I'm crushing it. Okay, we're at tier 2 now. So we either have picked up kids through universal screening through a self-identifying needs or a classroom teacher or teacher reporting screeners, and your district will probably use different ones than we use, and that's all good. So we're looking at intervention matching. We use the company Character Strong, which I like a lot of their things. They're very trauma informed, aligned. So we're talking about what a school counselor will do. And it's really important our school counselors are not being utilized as school assistant principals or school administrators.
Yeah, it's easy to have that happen.
It's super easy to have it happen. And it's a pitfall that a lot of schools fall into because we're short staffed. It's really important that we utilize our counselors to do counseling, that they're providing tier 1 lessons inside the classrooms, and then providing tier 2 services, which are small groups. Externalizing behavior would look like a plan to support the student in the classroom, whether it's a check-in and check-out system, a self-monitoring sheet, something like that. Those are for behaviors that we actually have learned, but we're having a hard time transferring them over in the natural teaching environment. I would caution people. I have seen people go plan crazy, and they have a ton of plans that they're managing, and at some point, it goes back to a tier 1 level. More than a few kids on plans or anything like that really goes back to a tier 1 level, and you got to reevaluate the classroom in a tier 1 as a whole.
Yeah, if you've got 25 kids in the class and 16 of them are on some kind of behavior plan,
I would even say
like,
5
is kind of a problem.
Really five's too many.
Yeah,
then we got to go back to tier 1.
You've got to really be careful about how many of the students in a room, percentage wise, are on a plan before you realize. This sounds really harsh. I don't mean it to be harsh, but like before you realize maybe something's wrong as far as like what we're doing again at a tier 1 level. Yeah,
we got to strengthen the tier 1 back up if that's the case. And I also say don't use plans to carrot and sticks kids either.
Yeah.
If you get 3 good days, then you're going to get this. I mean, that's basically back to a point system, which is really ineffective. Yeah. So it's really creating plans with kids and having them self-monitor, and it's relational currency that's going to pull you through on those. Really not the right choice for a lot of kids, but some kids do need that self-monitoring, have to have them buy in. The other one is internalizing behavior. These are small actual teaching SEL groups. They could be on executive functioning, friendship skills. Again, it's important to use a research-based curriculum and not just making up something. But those are things that could be happening as well on specific skills. It could be neuroscience lessons, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And then other options that could happen is our school counselor, who I shout out to her. She was a high school counselor of the year. We should have her on the podcast as well, talking about these specifically. But she's created trauma-informed therapy-based small group counseling, and these are volunteer ran. So these are really prevention groups before we get to tier 2, maybe kids that we're having concerns about that we think could benefit from. We do art therapy, music therapy, nature, yoga, and then pet therapy are options that we can offer. And those run about 8 weeks. And then there's pre and post data collection tools that we use for that. Again, tier 2 can look like restorative practices. We have a document that we use about how to accept and receive an apology. It's not, I'm sorry, that is not an apology. It's probably offering an apology. Write these down. How to apologize. That's a great episode. I don't think we did.
All right.
All right. So that's another good one. And then another tool we could use is an interest inventory to see what's motivating for the kids. A love language survey to see how they receive gifts. Each one of us are very uniquely different. I would even argue the universal needs assessment also would be a good tool that you can give to really pinpoint what the kid's lagging skill is and what we actually needed to fill that void in. So those are a lot of very specific things that we probably should come in. I think on our trauma-informed SBA, I think Ellie Masters talked a little bit about what the universal needs assessment is, if you're interested in that.
Yeah, I think, again, so much of it comes back to the idea of actually knowing the student well, which again, I know initially people get offended by really quick, but I think it's such an important part of knowing why something is happening. So if you know the student well, if you get to know the student well, and you are able to work alongside the student to come up with a solution after figuring out with the student what the problem even really is, then I think you have a way higher chance of being able to curb the problem behavior and help have some kind of replacement that is better, like helping the student solve the problem actually. But you have a way better chance of doing that if you actually know the student well and can help them walk through it, as opposed to just assuming we make a lot of assumptions, I think, when it comes to behavior, and that's never great.
Yeah, and I would say at this point, if anytime myself or my school counselor is working with a child or talking to a child, we document it in our behavior data system. Documentation is so key for all of this. You have to document. And then I or my school counselor would contact the family and include the teacher and on what the communication is for that. Be mindful of the K-3 suspension law. I know that's true in Ohio, but look at your suspension laws. Notice suspension wasn't any of the tier 2 options. So
yeah, for sure. All right, so then tier 3, I just ran into the microphone, I think. Tier 3, we've gone through tier 2. We're still running into the same kind of issues over and over again.
Yeah, we tried that for a while.
Yeah,
maybe did a couple rounds of tier 2, and
and
they're
so
not responding.
Then what do we do next?
So this is tier 3, more intensive level of supports. I'm going to start with the school counselor. Again, restorative conferencing with the child, maybe a more formal restorative conference. So if you do think about restorative practices, it's the tier 3 level of restorative practices in terms of the formal conference of like doing a lot of talking to different people and bringing people together. And it's a bigger production than just a quick tier 2 level repair. So I won't get into all that right now. One-on-one short-term counseling. This is where your school counselor could do some cognitive behavioral therapy or strengths-based counseling. So they can use different therapeutic approaches to do that one-on-one short-term counseling. School counselors are not to do long-term counseling. So they're seeing the school counselor more for than a year and a half, really. 2 years would be a really far stretch and probably overseen. They really need to be referred out to an outside agency or to your school-based mental health therapist. School counselors are not a long-term counseling solution. And they also don't really directly work on home issues, if that makes sense. They're school-based counseling, not private home counseling. So I think there's a good distinction for that. That needs to be an automatic referral for kids. So we could put the referral out for outside agencies, and we also could do research-based and data-driven SEL lessons. Those could come from the 180 Days of Educational Neuroscience, or some of Character Strong has some tier 3 levels. Again, we use that for our schools, so that's the program I'm referencing today. Then you're looking at your school psychologist. This is when I would bring in my school psychologist who serves on our MTSS team to evaluate school-based data. They're a wonderful, well-versed provider that has pretty extensive backgrounds, and most of them are educational specialists, understanding a lot about brain-based research and higher level counseling services. So they also are qualified to provide one-on-one counseling for students. They can do we do trauma-informed functional behavior assessments. We do trauma-informed behavior intervention plans. Those are things that I do with our school psychologists. They can help develop a crisis plan for your team. They could we have more people at our building. Justin and I both can do the collaborative proactive solutions, or the ASAP, or the Plan B process of Ross Green. So looking at your building, getting people trained, your school psychologist could be one of those people. They can do behavior rating skills. The BASC rating skills are a great way to identify kids' actual needs and to kind of like really get into what the actual core issue is. And then some kids may just need to develop a 504 plan, which your school psychologist can help do to put accommodations and modifications into place. And then we're looking at potential services being served in an IEP. Once you're on an IEP, like looking at behavioral mental health programs in your district. Do you want to share maybe some things that you would see on that?
Yeah, I was ready to do that. So, I think once we get to like that IEP level, again, services become a little bit more, I wouldn't say mandated really, but I think there's a lot of safeguards for parents, students, and families with an IEP as far as making sure that services are being provided, right? I think that's like sometimes it can feel like the IEPs are for like the staff at the school, but it's like really like the whole intent of them is like safeguards to make sure that the services that a student needs are actually being provided in a pretty laid out way. And so from a parent standpoint, I suppose, and from a school standpoint, you just have to understand that once we're talking about IEPs, and I would assume very similar for 504s, I'm less versed, I guess, in 504s than I am IEPs. But then you have stuff that's a lot more legally binding that has to be able to be followed. So it's a little bit more you say intense, but it's more assured that those services are going to be there. Whereas maybe at a tier 2 level, even some of the tier 3 level supports that are there, they aren't necessarily legally having to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas once you get to this level, it's definitely going to be. Obviously, we are aware that a lot of schools don't probably have a mental health, behavior mental health program or anything like that in the school individually. And even some schools that have behavior mental health kind of programs, a lot of times aren't going to, in all likelihood, have like a mental health provider, like whether that's a therapist or something like that. A lot of schools just don't have those on site all the time. We do in our setup. And so I know a lot of schools also do as well. If you do, that would be when, if we're into that kind of system now where we're at this IEP kind of level, that would be where increasingly you're going to maybe have a mental health therapist that's involved, that's seen a student with some kind of consistency. And hopefully, again, like in our situation, we have somebody that can be there and be in a classroom with a student, like in real time, seeing some of the things that are going on. And kind of helping them through a little bit more specifically, which is one of the advantages of that over an outside mental health therapist that is maybe meeting with a student after school hours or whatever. You don't quite get the same level of like understanding.
Yeah,
right?
and I think it's important to distinguish school-based mental health therapists are not family therapists, and they are not private therapists or therapists really to address any significant trauma there at school. They're to support the educational accessibility for students on a more intensive level through educational impact. So I think that gets confused. Somebody will say, well, this has happened to them, they should go see the therapist. And really, the school is not the forum to discuss previous trauma. And not that it's sometimes is a barrier, but really that goal of the educational mental health provider is to teach the kids tools and provide resources for them to be able to be successful in the tier 1 setting.
Yeah, it just gets weird. It's weird to understand and kind of hard to understand. And I'm just saying I understand it completely, fully all the time, or think in those terms all the time, even for as long as I've worked with, mental health therapists in a school setting. But I do think that that's an important distinction, right? Like sometimes you might be like, oh, maybe this student has all these really tough things that they've experienced in life. They're actually kind of maintaining pretty well at school and they don't have like a lot of problems. That actually would be like a great time to have them in all likelihood referred to an outside agency for some kind of therapy support.
I think it's important to go back. This is all educational impact.
Yeah.
School counselors, school-based mental health therapists, educational impact, not necessarily private things. It's things that are impacting the kids during a school day.
Yeah. And so whether it's even as intense as a behavior and mental health program or not, like even by the time you're talking 504s or maybe bumping up to an IEP, as far as intensity level or depth, I guess, of services, you just start to find that like it becomes a little bit more, we're talking about a little bit more intense. And we're also talking about like the idea that we've recognized that there are some other factors at play beyond just like, oh, maybe this kid's like a little stubborn, or maybe this kid just really had like a hard 2 months or whatever. Yeah,
I think federal law calls for, if you're looking at a kid with a mental health disorder, they should have 12 months documented in multiple settings. So I think a lot of people try to fast track those IEPs. I would tell you that would not happen at our school. I make us run through the tier process. There's going to be at least over a year's worth of data, multiple settings. When you're looking at IEP, you're looking at additional support needed to maintain safety throughout the school environment. You're also looking at the adverse educational impact, and then you're looking at the need for additional modifications or accommodations in the classroom and specific specially designed instruction, and potentially a change of their least restrictive environment. So lots that would impact that. But some of the other things we could think about in those studies, we talked about the counseling. We do a lot of FBAs and BIPs and crisis plans at that level of support, and certainly regular doing things with kids, that collaborative proactive solutions. And then you guys have access to this 180 days of educational neuroscience lessons. And then all those parents would be contacted by the school counselor, the school psychologist, and interventions reported in our district database system. This level, pretty more intensive supports, we're looking at like people will say, okay, no, kids get in a fight. What are you doing? Right? The crisis response.
So here's what I would say. I think we've talked about in another episode responding to crisis.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. We've got a 3-part series on it.
And so I think that this next part, really this whole next section, which is in here, could almost be connected to that little series that we talk about. So I think it's important that people understand. Maybe we don't go over all of it here.
Yes, I think that's good.
But I do think it's important that people understand this is a part of this document that we have is like emergency situations, right? If there's physical harm being caused, how do we respond to a crisis? What are the things you have to do after a crisis if there's been any kind of major incident, if there's been any kind of restraint or seclusion, like what has to happen. Like all of those things are in this document as well. And like I said, we kind of have gone over those before in previous episodes. So if you're interested in hearing us talk a little bit more in depth about those, because those are more than like a 4-minute, we go over it in 4 minutes kind of thing. But it is part of this because those are, especially if you're talking about tier 3 level kind of interventions that are happening, it's probably because there's some pretty intense things potentially going on. And so those are things that are addressed. It's not like we are so ignorant that we're like, if you just have the one-on-one counseling, then all the problems are solved or whatever. There's some other things that can start to happen that are intense and really require kind of crisis response. And so go back and listen to those episodes if you want to hear kind of a more fleshed out version of what we do once those situations come. That is also included here in this document. All right. So if people are out there listening, they're like, I've got nothing like this.
Yes.
We have no idea what to do. We're making it up every single time. And then we're getting confused on what we do when because we are making it up every time.
Yeah.
Where do people get started, or where can they begin with this process?
I would get a team together, and first of all, we can email you this document. So start there so you can see it in writing.
Yeah, give some kind of framework.
I encourage every building who wants to switch over their disciplinary practices to start working from the tier 1 and work all the way down to the more intensive behaviors. We too often spend all the time on the intensive behaviors and don't spend any time on the tier 1. And if you get the tier 1 right, you have very little to no intensive behaviors. So I think it's really, really important you start the tier 1 and then start providing professional development around those concepts and ideas. And this certainly could be a guidance for you, but that's where I think everybody needs to start.
Yeah, I had some other stuff that I said that doesn't really matter that much. I actually think that's what you just said, Katie, is the super important part, because I think schools really do jump so quickly. Because if you're feeling like you need to correct or you need to get a handle on really tough behavior in some way, shape, or form, or even just not even like really tough, but really consistent behavior that's undesired in any kind of way, shape, or form, you jump to looking at that as opposed to ever going to start at the tier 1 level.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people never take a look at the tier 1 level, but I really think that's been one of the important things as far as a reminder in our school, because we've got really great teachers, but I still think everybody needs reminders at times that actually this thing is a tier 1 situation or issue that we need to correct, not necessarily a tier 2 or tier 3 issue that we need to correct. And what that does is it makes sure that we keep rooms from having 9 kids that are on a plan, right? Because you start realizing, we actually have to just make an adjustment here at the tier 1 level. If we adjust these 2 or 3 things, all of a sudden we would only need 1 or 2 kids on some kind of separate plan that's more intense, or we only have 1 or 2 kids that are moving up to a tier 2 or a tier 3 level in a room instead of the 6 or 7 or 8 that we shouldn't be having. And so that's really, really important, but it's also the thing that's probably going to get the most pushback if you're out there starting all this and you want to address some of these issues or some of these problems, because what people aren't necessarily initially super open to hearing about is that maybe it's a tier 1 problem as far as a classroom teacher, maybe making adjustments to how they're doing things. And so you got to know that. So I think part of that goes back to making sure you have a team around you that is willing and ready to like do this work alongside you, because I think that makes a really big difference. And I think even that can start, you can go one step before that, and as a building, as a team, and then overall as a building, really deciding what does this building actually for real believe about students.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about, I think the episode with Charlie that we had, that we talked about the belief statements and stuff in there, but that is so true.
But I think if you have a building that understands what they believe about students, then all of a sudden you have something to, again, anchor back to and say, hey, but if we believe all are welcome here, right? Something that we say our building believes. If we're going to say that, then what does that mean when there's an undesirable behavior from a student in a classroom at a tier 1 level? So now what is that? Okay, that's fine. Like, but that means we're not going to just say this person needs to be gone, right? If everybody belongs here, this person can't just need to be gone. So what does that mean we have to do then? Because now all of a sudden what we believe about our building and what we believe about our students is going to drive what happens next. And so it's really all of that work. I know that can seem repetitive. I know that gets talked about a lot, not just by us. I mean, it gets talked about all over the place. Like, what is a belief statement? What's our guiding statement for our organization as a whole? Everybody's got those things going. But I think it's important to actually have something that people actually for real believe in, not just something that they say, not that it looks good on a t-shirt somewhere or on a sign out front, but what do we actually for real believe? Because that's going to make a difference. And then so many things go back to stuff we've talked about forever before that we don't have time to get into, but that should drive how we hire people, right? That should drive the people that we're picking to come work in our building. That should drive so many things. And then that helps just create and kind of form the culture over a period of time. But I do think so much of this goes back to starting to have a really strong, really shirt up kind of tier 1 belief of what we're doing and how we're doing it at a tier 1 level. So I think that's just really, really important. What would you want people to walk away with knowing? I feel like I just said mine. But you go ahead and...
I was just going to say, this is a working document. This isn't a final. You have to continuously get people bought in. You have to get people to revisit it, to revise it, to teach the new people about it. Those are all things you have to be intentional about. This will provide professional guidance and expectations. You also have to develop the time to talk to folks and work on it. Extra planning time is crucial for people to do some of the tier 1 work. And then committed to this work with student follow-up and parent communication is really important.
I think what I would say ultimately as we're walking away is that I can imagine, this is going to sound harsh, I can imagine this would be a hard episode to listen to, kind of. There's like a lot of like things that are like da-da-da-da-da, and this is what you do, and then this is next, and then this is, and you don't necessarily have anything in front of you. And it can be really hard to listen to this episode. I think it's easy to listen to the episodes, is my guess, that are like, kind of feel like heartfelt and let's go out there and do the work, right? Yeah, like I end it and I want to go out and do the work. The reality is it's stuff like this that is going out there and doing the work.
This is the work.
I mean, there's also other stuff that is more, exciting sounding to go do.
Yeah.
But my gosh, like it's this kind of stuff that's like the nitty gritty kind of like, man, you got to have something that you go back to. You got to have a laid out version of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 of how we're going to approach behavior in an MTSS process. You got to have it. I mean, you just have to have something like this. Yeah. Otherwise, you're out there floundering around. So I understand that it's like, it can be hard, but behind every, you think about it in like sports terms, right? Behind every they won like the championship game and look at all the excitement and that team had so much heart. That team probably practiced like an enormous amount on drills that were not exciting at all. That's the true thing about any organization, any kind of team, any kind of anything. And it's true of schools too. If you want this kind of work to really work well in your building, in your district, yes, it takes all of the good, heartfelt, like it feels good parts of it. Absolutely. Those parts are parts of it. More than that though, it takes this kind of stuff that is like details and working through hard stuff in offices, in meeting rooms with teams of people who are going over, but at tier 2, we are saying this, but is that really tier 2 or should that be more tier 1? and you're like kind of figuring it out together, and it's not exciting, and it was 30 minutes talking about one thing about where does it fall in the tiered system, because those are the things that have to happen to make sure that something actually runs smoothly. And that's hard. It's hard to potentially then listen, because what would be tempting is to only listen to the episodes and only like take to heart the episodes that are like, yeah, like everybody should be better, and we should be like getting in there with the kids and like helping solve problems and all these things. That sounds good, right? That's like more up our alley of what we want to do. Don't lose the fact that you have to do all this stuff, or it's never going to work.
Yeah, get up
It's
systems.
just never going to work. You got to put in like the hard work and the effort and the meetings and the figuring stuff out. You have to do all that stuff, and it is not easy, and it takes time, but that's what makes this stuff work, because it's like the foundation of it all that helps give structure to everything. Otherwise, everybody's just making it up all the time. So I know this is a little bit of a longer episode maybe than what we normally do, and that maybe it's a little bit less like, rah, rah, let's go get them. But I just want everybody to walk away hearing this is the kind of stuff you got to figure out how to do. And we're here to help you. Reach out to us. We'll send you, like we said, we'll send you this document as some kind of framework. It's certainly not the end all. We'll change stuff on it. I mean, over the years, like stuff will change. But if you need somewhere to get started, reach out to us. Let us know. But go back and listen maybe again and think, what are things I actually have to do to put in place if I want this to work? And then start doing those things, because it's a lot of hard work. But you can only get to the parts where it's like, it's going well. There's not a line of people outside your office. People get extra time. Like all these, you can only get there with all the hard work of the details of it. And you're going to have to make adjustments and things like that over time. But you got to start, and you can't just wait around and expect that you're going to be guided to a school that runs well because you have a good heart. That sounds harsh, but it's just the truth. You have to be able to have all the hard work that goes in with it. That's plenty for me to walk away with people knowing. As always, we're really excited that you came and you listened, wherever you're listening and whenever you're listening. We're excited that you're listening. It is a lot to go out and do all this.
Yeah.
Share this episode with somebody to where you're not feeling like you have to do it on your own. Like, get a group of people around you that believe a like-minded way, that want to create these kind of systems, and that maybe push back on what you believe, or maybe have a different way of thinking of what those tiered supports would be at different levels. Hey, work that out with people, like figure that out. But what you shouldn't do is just decide that you're going to just do this all by yourself, or try to do it all by yourself. Find people to do it with you. And the best way to do that right now is to share this episode with somebody and help them be able to join the conversation with you. And then that is going to really give you the chance to spread, obviously, this content around, but also open up a conversation for you and someone else. And as always, let's go out there and do the work.
This is the work. Go do it.